Hello, my name is Maria Cox, and on behalf of California State Parks, I want to thank you for coming and sharing a video tour with me today. I've been a guide here at the castle for about 8 years, and I thought we might get a chance to look at a closer look at one of the textile collections of Mr. Hearst's here. What we are often asked when we have the start of our upstairs suites tour here in the Doge Suite is, what are those things hanging on the wall? The simple answer, they're chasubles. But what are those? Well, they're religious vestments. These are garments that were worn by priests and during the different services, particularly those faiths that practice the Eucharist or communion. They actually go back further in history. They're based off of garments from ancient Rome called Chasubles. And these were actually garments worn by Romans traveling during the winter. And they would have long sleeve things. Over the centuries, these sleeves have gone away. Here in the Doge Suite, we have a pair of 18th century French silk chasubles. They're on what they call a faille fabric made of silk, and they have silk embroidery on them. One thing you'll notice though is that their colors have faded. UV light is very damaging to textiles. What will happen is colors will fade and the fabrics, the threads, will turn brittle and often break. So here at Castle, we've taken measures to try and protect our collection a little bit more. Firstly, we tend to close the blinds during the brighter parts of the day to limit the amount of light exposure coming into the rooms. And we've also put UV filters on those windows to keep the UV light out, which does the most damage. Now, there's a simple little experiment you can do to prove to yourself just how damaging these rays can be. We all know here during the summer, you're not wearing those black socks. So take a pair out of that sock drawer, take one of those socks, tape them up into any window in your house, doesn't have to be any particular directional window, and then stick the other one back in your drawer. At the end of the summer, take them out and do a little comparison, and you'll see what just 2 months of daily exposure to light can do to a textile. So you might be asking, why would Mr. Hearst collect religious garments? Well, according to our museum director, Mayor Letkoff, collecting of religious vestments and using them as wall decorations was a sign of more opulence than paintings. And Mr. Hearst will definitely use them to the effect here in his Gothic sitting room, where we have 2 15th and 2 16th century Spanish chasubles. Now, what makes them so opulent will be their opries, the embroidered band that goes down the back. And we can get a closer look at one in more detail as we make our way over to Mr. Hearst's bedroom. So here, we have a great look at an embroidered opry. Now, opries were started to be used on chasubles beginning in the 8th century, and they would get more elaborate as time would go on. They used incredible detail in their embroidery. Often they would be done on gold fabric and using gold and silver metallic threads. Now, those threads are rather special in the way they were made. Strands of silk would have wrapped around them sheets of either gold or silver that were kind of pounded out to a thinness of about the thickness of a hair. And this made them unique because then they couldn't be used to actually be sewn, and they needed to be placed on top of the pieces. In a method known as couching, they would be attached using a silk thread that matched the color of the embroidery. Here is a 15th century Italian chasuble that we have mounted behind glass to protect it. And what makes it even more unique is the surface that it's on. It's on a voided blue velvet. Now, what voided means is that they've removed the nap or some of the fabric off of the base. And what it did, it created this unique floral pattern. So when we talk about the making of chasubles, it's important to look about who was making them. And as you might expect, it was women. These women would also be in charge of the workshops or with their families as far as how these crafts would be produced. These workshops set up special rules onto how they would be created, one of them being that they could only do the embroidery during natural lighting, which means they had to have sunlight in order to work. So imagine how much more could get accomplished in the summer versus the winter. All right. Now, it would take a team of 4 women, about 1271, 3 3/4 years to complete an altar frontal. Now, for that altar frontal, they were paid £270 in 1271. What's the equivalent today? Well, in 2017, the equivalent would be £160,500. Now, we can imagine what we could get with that today, but what could they get with £270 in 1271 England? Well, they could get in the neighborhood of 200 head of horses, or maybe up to 600 head of cattle to help with the village. So they were paid quite well for the craftsmanship that they did. When they did the embroidery, I've mentioned a couple of times how they did it on the fabric. The embroidery actually wasn't sewn directly onto the fabric, but done separately. Because of those metallic threads, it's not something you could very easily clean. So they would remove the embroidered pieces off the base. Those ofries were the ones that they would remove. Then the textile itself could be cleaned, and then the pieces would be reattached onto the base. Well, it's been a pleasure to show you a few of what actually are my favorite items here in our collection. Mr. Hearst did have a wealth of textiles, and if you are interested in seeing more of these chasubles, you can all be seen on our upstairs suites tour. And we hope to have you come and join us soon.